The Denver Broncos have been one of the more aggressive teams so far in free agency, and I think they're making all of the right moves. So in this video, we're going to be talking all things Denver Broncos, from their free agency to their upcoming draft, all the way up to what I actually think the Denver Broncos will look like in 2025. So if you like the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. So the best way to start off the video is by talking about the actual moves that the Denver Broncos have made so far in free agency, and as I have mentioned, I've liked most of the moves so far. So as you can see, not a ton of names on this list. Like, you've seen other teams have more names here, like Detroit, but I think the names and values of the guys they brought in have been really solid. So they began by bringing in Talanoa Hufanga, 3-year $45 million deal. Dre Greenlaw, 3-year $31.5 million deal. You bring in Evan Ingram on a 2-year $23 million deal. A little bit of an overpay for that one, but still, I do think Evan Ingram is a good player. Trent Sherfield, Sam Ehlinger, and you re-sign a couple of key guys. And if you ask me, in my opinion, who I think are the true winners of free agency, I would definitely classify the Denver Broncos as being true winners. They didn't really lose much this offseason. They brought back some of their big name guys like DJ Jones, and for the most part, the team is just incredibly solid. And you add Talanoa Hufanga to it, you add Drake Greenlaw to it, you add Evan Ingram to it, and while those players, in my opinion, are not superstars or anything like that, those are really high level starters who are going to play some really good snaps on this team. So now we look at the depth chart for the Denver Broncos, and I just think this is one of the best built rosters in the NFL. This team does have some holes, and we'll kind of talk about that as we get along here, and we'll talk about what I would personally do if the draft were today. But if you look at it as of when I'm recording the video, this roster is, as I mentioned, incredibly solid. On offense, basically, it is the exact same as last year, plus Evan Ingram, and you're supposing that Jaleel McLaughlin, Devon Bailey, and a couple other players are going to take more of a sizable role in 2025 with some potential upgrades in the draft. We'll start off with the offensive side of things, because last year the offense was pretty darn good. I mean, by all accounts, Bo Nix had a really awesome rookie season. He looked like one of the better rookie quarterbacks by the end of it. Of course, time will tell how that draft pans out, how Bo Nix pans out, how Caleb, Jaden, Drake, so on and so forth, how all those guys pan out. But I think it's pretty fair to say that Bo Nix is off to a really solid start to his career. He's a very smart player. He works well in play action, reads the RPO game quite nicely, can get the ball out quickly, made a couple of nice tight window throws. I still think his deep ball game is a little bit limited, and I don't think he's ever going to be, considered like a top 5 quarterback, because he's not really a huge playmaker. But if he keeps it up, I think Bo Nix is easily going to be considered one of the more solid starting quarterbacks in the league. And if you build a really awesome roster around him, then I think he can be good enough to lead a team to where they ultimately want to go to. With that said, this offense does have some holes, and it kind of does begin with the running back position. Right now, their starter is Jaleel McLaughlin, who is young and still improving, but only less than 500 yards last year on 113 carries. Yes, he's a younger guy who I still want to give a little bit of some hope to, but I think he'd be better served as more of like a second option, more so than a starter. You also have Audric Estime, a bit more of a bruiser style guy. Don't really think that he's going to have much of a role next year, especially if they do draft a running back, but maybe on like 3rd and 1, 4th and short type situations, maybe you put the bowling ball that is Audric Estime out there. Receiving core wise, I think also needs another body. Right now, I think they have a really good wide receiver 1/2 in Courtland Sutton, but I think the rest of the guys are like wide receiver 3 quality receivers. So this team really could use that, maybe like that second option next to Courtland Sutton, because I think Devon Bailey had a really solid year last year. I mean, this was somebody drafted super late last year and had 475 yards and kind of came on a little bit later in the season. So I have some faith in him. Marvin Mims continues to have a role, but I view him as being sort of that pseudo number 3 option on an offense. But with Devon Bailey there, you're going to probably switch those guys in and out. Troy Franklin, I don't think will ever develop to be a true go-to option for Bo Nix, but as somebody who is incredibly fast and can run a nice little deep ball, I think that's kind of what his role is going to be. You also brought in Trent Sherfield, who I kind of thought got a little bit overpaid. Last year, he only had 8 catches for 83 yards and really has only had one decent season where he had 417 yards in 2022. But yeah, outside of that, hasn't really been the most productive guy. So I think this receiving core could really use another option. Again, we'll talk about what those options could look like in the draft a little bit later. Tight end, you brought in Evan Ingram, who last year dealt with some injuries, so didn't have statistically the best season by no means. But with the Jacksonville Jaguars, 766 yards in 2022, 963 yards in 2023. 2023, and for the most part throughout his career has been a pretty solid receiving tight end in the NFL. He's kind of improved from his time with the New York Giants. With Jacksonville, he looked really sharp, and then unfortunately last year the Jaguars were, one, a bad roster, and two, very injured, and Evan Ingram happened to be one of those guys. So in this upcoming season, if you do rock with Evan Ingram and Adam Troutman as your two tight end starters, I really have no issue with that. I still do think if there is a really quality tight end on day 3 available, I think you should consider it. The offensive line is absolutely awesome. Garrett Bowles at left tackle, Ben Powers at guard, Luke Wattenberger at center, Quinn Miners and Mike McGlinchey. Like, that's probably going to be your starting 5, and that's one of the better offensive lines out there. I would say the interior of the offensive line, primarily Ben Powers and Luke Wattenberger, like, yes, you can find some potential replacements there. Like, Luke has only played 1 season, and I thought was solid last year, but if you do feel like you can find a true upgrade, maybe you consider it, but I'm not considering offensive line in the first round of the draft, so I feel really okay with this offensive line heading into 2025 because I just look at it on paper and look at it what I saw last year, and it was pretty damn good, so I feel really confident about this offensive line. Let's now look over at the defense, which, spoiler alert, I think this defense is unbelievably awesome. So when you look at the defense here, I mean, I think this team has some of the most underrated and least talked about productive players in the NFL. Like, nobody talks about Nick Bonito. The dude had 13.5 sacks last year. He ranked 3rd in sacks last year, and I feel like nobody talks about Nick Bonito. He's a young player who's awesome on the field. Jonathan Cooper, who the hell nobody talks about Jonathan Cooper, but he had 10.5 sacks last year, right? And I know sacks are not the full story for a defensive lineman, but I mean, it's such a massive number. It's for every single edge rusher out there. We kind of judge them by how many sacks they get or how many pressures they get. Those guys are awesome at doing that. John Franklin Myers, I've heard he's a little frustrated here in Denver, but he had 7 sacks last year. Zach Allen, 8.5 sacks last year as well. And then you bring in Dre Greenlaw, who can be a nice little blitzer, but probably sticks just strictly as an outside linebacker who will blitz here and there. Alex Singleton. And your secondary is really good as well. Frankly, I think the only thing that is a potential upgrade spot is, well, number one, I think you do need to find a bit more edge rushing depth because I do believe that some of these contracts are up here soon. And like I mentioned, I think John Franklin Myers might be out the door. But beyond that, the only position in 2025 that I have some level of concern with, and it's not even really a true concern, it's just like, yeah, he had a good year last year, but it could have been better, is probably the second cornerback spot next to Pat Surtain. Now, to be fair to Riley Moss, an NFL quarterback is not going to throw out Pat Surtain. An NFL quarterback is likely not going to test Jaquan McMillan. So in kind of an unfortunate set of circumstances here, they're going to pick on Riley Moss as often as they can. And I didn't think he had a bad year by no means. He let up, I think, like 61 catches last year, which is a little bit higher than what I would like. But again, they have to throw it at somebody, and it just kind of happened to be that Riley Moss got picked on a little bit more than, you know, obviously Patrick Surtain. So I look at this defense, and last year it was one of the better defenses out there. It's a defense that heavily relies on getting to the quarterback, trusting Patrick Surtain, causing havoc, and I think next year you're going to continue to do that. But now you add in Talanoa Hufanga, who has dealt with injuries, but when he's on the field is incredibly solid, and Dre Greenlaw, who, yes, the Achilles isn't a massive injury, but he kind of looked okay last year during a short little time, and I feel like if there's a team that can get the most out of him, I do think that it would be the Denver Broncos, who have an awesome defensive scheme and just seem to get the most out of every single player they draft. So I think that Dre Greenlaw should have a really solid time there with the Denver Broncos. And man, I have a feeling that this Denver defense, I'm going to say it outright. I think this Denver defense arguably could be the best defense in the NFL next year because they have legitimate pass rush juice, legitimate secondary members, and now you add in dudes like Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga who have experience going deep in the playoffs, and it's like, what is there missing on this defense? Again, maybe a second cornerback, but I mean, Jaquan McMillan's awesome. Riley Moss is not a scrub. He's a good player, and of course, Pat Surtain won Defensive Player of the Year. So I just don't really realistically see a team in a playoff setting finding a way to consistently beat this Denver Broncos team. Like, it's just such a great defense. And yes, I know Buffalo had some success against them last year, but I think that was more of the offense for Denver not necessarily being as high powered as it could be. Not to mention they couldn't really run the ball, so they couldn't slow down the game. And, you know, the Denver defense held up as best they could, but eventually the crack was going to fall because Josh Allen is an awesome player who won MVP. So yeah, man, I just really like this Denver team. I think it's incredibly solid. And I think when we look at the draft, which I guess we can now kind of transition to the draft section of this video, where what do I think this team needs to address first? Well, I think it needs to be a pretty heavy skill position draft. I feel really good about their edge rushers, their defensive defensive line, their offensive line, their front seven, so on and so forth. I think this team really needs a solid, impactful skill position draft. So skill positions, in case you don't know, are things like running backs, receivers, corners, safeties, so on and so forth. Those are more of like your fancy things. Like, you know, CeeDee Lamb is a fancy thing to have, but you can get away with not necessarily having a CeeDee Lamb like Denver Broncos have been doing. But I think it is time, though, that Denver does pay attention to those spots, because I think, frankly, they really need a running back upgrade over Jaleel McLaughlin. I mean, I would love to see Jaleel play more of like a second running back role, and then, you know, pair him up with potentially like an Amari Hampton. If Genty somehow falls to you, I would love that. You know, Quinshot Judkins, I'm very high on, and a number of other guys too. So I think it's a good running back class. You can take one with your first round pick, or you can take one on day 2, wherever you want to take them. And then I think you need to do the opposite. If you take running back in round 1, maybe you take a wide receiver on day 2. I think either way, no matter how it works out, running back, receiver, maybe edge rushing depth are really the things that I would focus on. So some names to kind of keep an eye on in this year's draft that I would consider for the Denver Broncos. And by the way, if you guys want to see some of my mock drafts, I have a whole playlist on my channel where I do mock drafts, and every single video I talk about the Denver Broncos and what they usually should do. And a lot of the times it's, you know, some good players. So check that out if you want to. In terms of some actual names for running backs, Amari Hampton, like I mentioned, Quinshot Judkins, Travion Henderson, Caleb Johnson. I would say that those are probably the names you're going to be looking at pick 20. Amari Hampton is probably the one that will be picked there if he's not already off the board, but those are some other names out there as well. For receiver, Tetairoa McMillan, if he falls to 20, which I've seen a couple mock drafts have that happening. I don't think it will, but potentially. Matthew Golden, Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka. A sneaky one here, but I'm a huge fan of Jaden Higgins. I think he would be an awesome player. So kind of keep an eye out on those receivers. I think the best fit for this team maybe would be like Emeka Egbuka. I think his IQ, his hands, his reliability, his ability to play in the slot and play on the outside, paired up with Devon Bailey and Cortland Sutton, I think could be a nice little fit there. So I would say Emeka Egbuka would be a really solid fit. I also love the fit of Matthew Golden, who's a bit more of a true outside receiver, reliable hands, great route runner, and I think would be a good fit for this offense as well. So kind of those are two names that I would look out for. Ted McMillan probably won't be there, so just keep that in mind. I still think tight end is a position of need, but I don't think it's as drastic now. Like, I think you have a bit more flexibility to not have to take one in round 1. However, if Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren is there, I think you take both of those guys because those are awesome players. But if they happen to not be, then I think on day 2 or day 3, you're looking at guys like Gunnar Helm, Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin, some guys like that, Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. So those could all be reliable options who maybe don't impact you day 1, but in years 2 and 3 could maybe become your full-time starters. In terms of defensively, again, I don't really think this defense has a lot of things they got to do. Like, they probably need another edge rusher for depth reasonings, so maybe you draft one on day 2 or day 3. In terms of some names, JT Tuimoloau, I think would be an awesome player for this team. Braden Swinson would also be awesome for this team. So those are really some names there in terms of cornerback depth. I don't think cornerback is a huge need, but if you, for whatever reason, find a way to get Will Johnson on your roster, I kind of think you consider taking Will Johnson and pairing him up to Patrick Surtain and just saying, fuck it, we're going to have the best defense in the NFL by a mile. You won't be able to move on us. That would be nasty. Jahdae Barron would be an awesome fit, though I think he's a bit more of like a true slot guy, so maybe not there, but you could move around and probably play outside corner if you need him to. Trey Amos, Siobhan Ravel, so on and so forth. Azariah Thomas, I'm a big fan of. So there are a lot of names to watch for the Denver Broncos, but I still think they should prioritize running back and wide receiver. That would be ultimately what I would do. So hypothetically speaking, if we do assume the Denver Broncos have an excellent draft that does address some of their skill position issues, then I look at this Denver Broncos team and I say it's probably the second best team in the AFC West. Obviously, it's incredibly difficult to surpass a team like Kansas City that has, of course, Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, Andy Reid. Like, it's just very unlikely that they'll be a better team than Kansas City. Even if I do think Kansas City has taken a bit of a step back from last year, still think it's Kansas City. You still have to trust them next year. So Denver's probably second. I think that number 2 spot, though, is highly competitive because the Chargers have, made some nice upgrades with Mekhi Becton and Najee Harris. I still do like that Chargers team, and they very well could be the second best team in that division as well. And then you got to watch out for the Raiders. They brought in Geno Smith. There's still a ton of holes on the offensive end, but they're kind of not too far away from being pretty similar to Denver, where they have their quarterback figured out, but they just need to figure out their skill positions and maybe another corner on the defense. But I just think that Denver's the best of the three. If you were to ask me which of the three are going to be the best teams in 2025, obviously Mahomes and the Chiefs will be number one. I think that's pretty fair to say. But if you're asking me which team do I think will fall second in the division, for me it comes down to the LA Chargers and the Denver Broncos. And if we assume the Broncos have a really solid draft, I feel like there's a really good shot Denver gets that spot. I don't want to say it outright because I'll probably talk myself into the Chargers at some point, but I think there's a damn good chance. I think Denver probably will make the playoffs again next year, no matter what, whether they're second or third. It's just how it's going to roll next year because Denver's a good team. But if Bo Nix takes a step forward, if they address running back, if they address receiver, I have a hard time seeing this team completely failing out next year. Like, I really like this roster. I like their coach. I think they're a talented unit with a great defense. So in terms of what their future looks like, I think there's one word that kind of sums it up. Their future is bright. It's unbelievably exciting if you're a Denver Broncos fan because you're a young team. You found a way to get out of the Russell Wilson hell, and you have a young star quarterback, a great head coach, a great defense. Life is good if you're a Denver Broncos fan. So you guys let me know in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on the Denver Broncos? What should they do in the draft? And will they or will they not be the second best team in the AFC West? You guys tell me in the comment section below. If you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.